In the cavernous hall of the Galactic Tribunal, the silence was as heavy as the towering pillars and intricate holograms that floated above the council chamber. Here, the most powerful representatives from each corner of the galaxy sat in judgment, their forms shimmering with technology and regality. Each species, unique and advanced, exuded an aura of age-old power and knowledge. In this chamber, sentences were given with finality, and mercy was rarely an option. The tribunal members, each a high-ranking authority among their people, had gathered today to address an unexpected anomaly, a human. To them, Earth's inhabitants were curiosities, scarcely beyond primitive status. Most viewed humanity as a volatile species with minimal restraint and limited intellect. Humans had arrived on the galactic stage only recently, and their reputation among these ancient beings was dubious at best. Yet, despite humanity's perceived inadequacy, this human had dared to trespass beyond the bounds deemed acceptable by interstellar law. The tribunal had convened to make an example of them. The human stood before them now, appearing almost insignificant amidst the grandeur of the tribunal's chamber. The tribunal members regarded this figure with something between disdain and disinterest. To them, the human's supposed crime was as meaningless as the individual who committed it. The human had crossed a border, inadvertently stepping into restricted space, a minor transgression by most species standards. But for humanity, each misstep was carefully scrutinized. Their impulsive behavior was a topic of constant debate among the tribunal members. The council's head, a being with a tall, silvery frame that glimmered with shifting light, spoke first. Its voice was both cold and resonant, reverberating in tones that implied ultimate authority. "Human," it intoned, "you stand here accused of crossing boundaries laid out by this council. In doing so, you have shown the inherent recklessness of your kind, a characteristic we have observed and noted since your arrival." Other council members nodded in agreement, their expressions a mixture of scorn and indifference. To them, humanity was an unpredictable variable, and the tribunal had a zero-tolerance policy for chaos within their orderly domain. "Such recklessness," another council member hissed, "merits a sentence fitting of your species' nature." The decision had already been made. Exile. But this was no ordinary exile. This was a punishment designed to be final, a solution that would rid the galaxy of another human's unpredictable influence. The tribunal's leader spoke again. "Your sentence is exile to Varric 4. The name echoed across the hall, and the human's face registered a flicker of confusion. Varric 4 was infamous, a world classified as a death world, a place so hostile that only the fiercest creatures could survive its harsh ecosystem, toxic atmosphere, and violent terrain. The council had decreed that only the most irredeemable beings would be sent to such a place, for no creature exiled to Varric 4 had ever returned. The human's bewilderment was evident, yet the tribunal members only smirked. To them, this bewildered response merely underscored humanity's inherent weakness. A frail species, no match for even the mildest challenges of interstellar survival, would be swiftly eradicated on Varric 4. The tribunal's judgment was simple: let the human attempt to survive in the galaxy's harshest ecosystem. They knew it wouldn't be long before nature itself corrected this mistake. An alien with a face resembling shifting sands leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Perhaps this exile will teach your species the meaning of humility," it hissed. "Let it be known that we do not tolerate chaos in our domains." The sentence was met with mild amusement by the council. To most of them, this was as good as sentencing the human to death. In their eyes, no creature could withstand the sheer brutality of Varric 4, least of all a creature with a soft body and limited defenses like this one. They laughed quietly among themselves, placing small bets on how long the human would last before being claimed by the planet's merciless environment. One council member, with glittering eyes, wagered a single cycle. The council's conversation continued in low tones, the general consensus being that the human would succumb quickly, a fate that seemed both fitting and inevitable. One councilor's eyes, however, held a flicker of doubt. Commander Yora, who had watched humanity's entry into the galactic community with careful scrutiny, was the only one who remained silent. The rest noticed and turned toward her, smirking at her hesitation. One counselor sneered. Do you feel pity for the creature, Yora? Yora hesitated before speaking, her voice softer than her peers but steady. It is not pity, she said, but caution. I have studied their history. These creatures are stubborn. They adapt in strange ways, often in ways we do not predict. Perhaps they will surprise us. The council laughed, dismissing her concern as sentimental nonsense. You give them far too much credit, Yora. They lack the physical strength, the intelligence, or the resilience to endure Varric Forest trials. Sentencing this human there's an act of mercy by comparison to what the planet itself will do. Yora remained silent, allowing the others their moment of amusement. She knew she couldn't sway their opinion now, but she felt an instinctive caution. The human's quiet gaze met hers for a brief moment, and she saw something in their eyes, an unspoken defiance, a hint of resilience. Perhaps Yora would be wrong, but she wondered if this species held more within them than the tribunal realized. As the council's decision was finalized, the human was led away, their fate sealed. The counselors settled back into their seats, convinced that their decision had effectively removed another inconvenience from the galaxy. To them, it was a matter of closing a chapter, an end to a minor disturbance in their otherwise ordered universe. Yet as the doors to the chamber closed behind the human, Yora couldn't shake the thought that perhaps this sentence would not go as smoothly as her peers expected. The human's arrival on the Deathworld was violent, the pod crashing to the planet's surface with a deafening thud. As the hatch hissed open, an unbearable wave of heat poured in, scorching their skin and filling their lungs with searing, sulfur-tainted air. The gravity felt like a leaden weight pressing down on them, each movement heavier, more laborious. Around them, alien fauna and flora pulsed with life, each organism seemingly designed to inflict harm. The sky was an eerie green, thick with dark clouds that swirled ominously, hinting at storms brewing on the horizon. As the human took in their surroundings, their vitals flashed an alien script on screens back at the tribunal's observation chamber. Council members watched in smug anticipation, expecting a swift decline. The increased heart rate, labored breathing, and faint tremors made it seem as though their assumption of imminent failure was correct. The lead counselor leaned back, waiting for the inevitable. The human staggered forward, scanning the jagged landscape. This was unlike anything they'd seen, a mix of cracked earth, toxic rivers, and hostile vegetation. As they moved cautiously, a flash of movement in their peripheral vision drew their attention. A creature with scales the color of burning embers and claws as long as their forearm prowled, its eyes gleaming with predatory intent. It let out a guttural hiss, and the human froze, instinctively crouching behind a nearby rock. Breathing shallowly, they gripped a piece of broken metal from the crash, ready to defend themselves. Back at the tribunal, the council members leaned forward, watching intently as the human made themselves small, waiting until the beast finally lost interest and stalked away. One counselor sneered, dismissing the creature's disinterest as luck. Yet, as minutes turned into hours, the human continued to evade more dangers, proving elusive in a way that none of the tribunal expected. The next hours presented a cascade of challenges. The Deathworld was relentless in its hostility. Storms lashed the ground with acidic rain that burned the skin, and toxic plants released spores with each brush of movement. At one point, a band of small, spider-like creatures, their legs tipped with venomous barbs, scuttled close, forcing the human to scramble up an outcropping of rocks for safety. Despite the blistering heat, the human remained vigilant, eyes scanning their surroundings, heart pounding but undeterred. In a particularly tense moment, they noticed one of the plants oozing a thick sap that smelled acidic, something to avoid. Hours into their survival, the human had already learned critical things about their environment. They skirted the boundaries of large rocks, learning to use natural barriers as shields. They discovered a few small plants that, unlike the others, didn't give off a noxious smell and had leaves that were smooth rather than serrated. Testing the edges with the slightest nibble, they discovered they were edible, even providing a slight amount of hydration. These small discoveries, though mundane, marked a level of ingenuity and determination that had surprised even Yora, who watched in silence as her peers murmured in disbelief. Days passed, and the tribunal continued to monitor the humans' progress, growing uneasy at their endurance. They'd seen this before, but only from species with enhanced physiology, beings naturally adapted to harsh climates and physically equipped to handle such conditions. This human, however, with little more than scraps and improvisation, had begun to create something resembling a life on this death world. Using stones and fragments of the crashed pod, they fashioned a rudimentary shelter against the fierce winds and stinging rains. To shield themselves from prowling predators, they concealed their camp with thorny branches and avoided leaving food scraps that would attract larger creatures. Using shards from the pod, the human crafted rudimentary tools. One, sharpened to a jagged edge, allowed them to dig shallow pits around their camp, filling them with jagged stones as a crude but effective deterrent for ground predators. Another shard, attached to a branch, became a makeshift spear, primitive by galactic standards, but in the human's hands, it was a reliable line of defense. The tribunal watched, their smugness giving way to a sense of begrudging respect. This creature, whom they'd dismissed as a fragile, unsophisticated life form, had adapted far beyond their expectations. The human had found pockets of survival in places where most species would find only hardship. One counselor muttered that perhaps the death world wasn't punishing enough, suggesting they intervene, yet others insisted they wait, curious now, wanting to see just how far this human could go. During a council meeting, they replayed footage of the human's survival, watching in silence as the human tended to a wound sustained from a nearby spiked plant, cleaning it with rainwater collected from a hollow rock. Yora noted the quiet determination in the human's expression, the sheer grit that kept them moving despite the odds. "We may have underestimated their adaptability," she murmured, a hint of pride coloring her voice. The council members exchanged glances, some reluctantly nodding in agreement. "Perhaps," one of them conceded. "But adaptability has its limits. The death world has no end to its horrors. Sooner or later, this human will meet one they cannot outwit." But as the days wore on, even the most skeptical members began to recognize that this human possessed a quality they hadn't accounted for. The counselor who had placed a bet on the human's immediate demise now watched the screens in silence, surprised as the human continued to survive through each new challenge, finding ways to make tools, to shelter, to adapt. In the council chamber, there was an unspoken tension, as though each member was both drawn to and unnerved by the human's endurance. They'd expected resignation or a rapid demise, but instead, they were witnessing a quiet, relentless tenacity. One by one, they found themselves admitting, at least privately, that perhaps humanity held within it a strength they hadn't anticipated. And as the human, standing alone on that brutal, unforgiving planet, continued to defy their expectations, a ripple of unease settled over the council. For the first time, they began to wonder if their understanding of this species, this stubborn, indomitable species, was deeply flawed. The Deathworld's hostility intensified with each passing day. Acidic storms grew fiercer, soaking the human's clothing and skin in painful, stinging rain, while volcanic vents spewed heat that could cook flesh in seconds. The temperature swings grew unpredictable, dropping to freezing lows only to soar into brutal highs within hours. Predators, sensing weakness, prowled nearer, their eyes glinting in the shadows. Every step was a gauntlet, every hour a test of endurance and resilience. For the human, survival was no longer a struggle against a single foe but against a world that seemed to actively resist their existence. Yet each new threat was met with a careful calculation and determination. The human refused to bow to this relentless barrage. Despite their exhaustion, they set to work on new strategies to navigate the increasingly hostile landscape. They fashioned a rudimentary cover from thick leaves coated in mud to protect themselves from the acidic rain, creating a makeshift poncho. For shelter, they built windbreaks from fallen branches and packed them with a mud and rock mixture to block both the storms and the biting cold. These small acts of problem-solving chipped away at the world's constant aggression, giving them the upper hand, if only briefly. In need of water, the human began to experiment with different plants, cautiously testing their juices. Some left a bitter taste, others burned, but eventually they found a handful that, when boiled with heated stones, could be filtered into drinkable water. They developed a habit of carrying these leaves around, wringing them out and rationing each precious drop of hydration. The human was not only enduring but adapting, their approach evolving with each new lesson taught by the world's unforgiving conditions. Around them, the ecosystem was dense with life that seemed born from violence: spiny creatures, plants with defensive toxins, and insects with venom-tipped appendages. The human, however, had started to repurpose these threats to their advantage. They crafted small but sharp blades from shards of bone left by large predators, attaching them to branches to fashion crude but effective weapons. Larger bones became clubs, and sinew from the remains of unfortunate creatures was used to reinforce traps designed to deter any predator foolish enough to wander too close. Their biggest discovery came when they stumbled upon an abandoned alien wreckage half buried in a ravine. Cautiously, they examined the scattered remains of the foreign machinery, finding parts they could adapt to their shelter. Transparent panels became windows in their hideout, allowing them to spot threats without being seen. Wires and broken circuits sparked faintly, hinting at some retained charge. With painstaking care, they extracted bits of alien metal, using it to reinforce their tools and weapons, effectively combining human ingenuity with remnants of alien technology. This discovery marked a turning point. The human was no longer merely surviving but reshaping the world around them in their favor. The tribunal watched in stunned silence, the humans' achievements challenging everything they believed about so-called primitive species. Counselor Zal, who had been skeptical from the start, leaned forward with something close to admiration, unable to deny the human's sheer adaptability. They're learning," he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. Others were less impressed, chalking it up to luck. "Anyone can adapt with enough time," one counselor scoffed. "They've stumbled on remnants of higher technology. Nothing more than a fluke." Yet the debate grew heated, with several members arguing that this was far more than simple luck. The humans' continued survival, achieved through resourcefulness and quick adaptation, was beginning to look like evidence of a rare, inherent resilience. Yora, watching intently, couldn't help but admire the way the human had turned this death sentence into a proving ground. The council, once convinced that the human would perish swiftly, now faced an undeniable truth: the very nature of human survival was challenging their assumptions. The more they observed, the more Yora began to sense that there was something unique, something profoundly adaptable in the human spirit. It was during a particularly violent storm that the humans' efforts reached a new height. With rain flooding their shelter and lightning streaking across the sky, they fashioned a drainage system from alien scrap, directing water away from their camp. In a move that astonished the tribunal, they even managed to rig parts of the alien wreckage to trap and channel the storm's energy, heating the shelter during freezing nights. This adaptation hinted at a creativity and resilience that not only defied alien expectations but seemed to thrive under pressure, bending the environment to their will rather than yielding to it. Perhaps most astonishing, the humans' ingenuity began to leave an impact on the Deathworld itself. The traps they set, the adaptations they made to gather resources, even the repurposing of materials had started to subtly shift the local ecosystem. Predators began avoiding certain areas. Plants the human had harvested grew differently as they adapted to a new kind of foraging. It was as though the world, like the counselors, was being forced to acknowledge this strange new presence in its midst. And as the humans stood, silently observing their own work, they couldn't know that in a distant council chamber, they had won over even their harshest critics. Though still prideful, many of the tribunal members had come to view them with awe, reluctant but undeniable respect flickering in their eyes. This human, this fragile being, had proven itself to be far stronger and more adaptable than any of them had anticipated. The Deathworld had been expected to break them, yet here they were, reshaping its very laws of survival with nothing but sheer will and ingenuity. The final trial was nothing short of catastrophic. A massive, ancient predator, a creature known for hunting with both brute force and cunning, had appeared in the humans' territory. Its sheer size and ferocity were unmatched by anything else on the planet, and the human was in immediate danger. With jaws capable of crushing stone and claws like daggers, it was the ultimate test of the human's survival skills. The creature's bloodthirsty roars echoed through the atmosphere, shaking the humans' fortifications. The tribunal, observing from their distant vantage point, braced for what they assumed would be the final failure of the human. However, the human did not panic. They assessed the situation with remarkable clarity, realizing that they could not match the predator in physical strength. Instead, they turned to the knowledge and tools they had accumulated over their time on the Deathworld. Drawing upon their expertise in trapping and using environmental factors, they set a clever bait, luring the creature into a narrow ravine where its size would become a disadvantage. The human utilized sharp rocks, bones, and parts of the alien wreckage, rigging the area with traps that would not only capture the creature but also deliver a fatal blow. With a careful, deliberate approach, they took down the beast, proving they could conquer even the most fearsome of challenges. The victory was not merely survival. It was an exhibition of human ingenuity, the ability to outthink and outlast even the harshest forces of nature. The tribunal's monitoring systems buzzed with readings of the human success, and for the first time, a quiet respect began to grow among the counselors. This was no mere fluke. The human had mastered the Deathworld in a way that no other species, even those with superior strength and intellect, could have done. With the massive predator now eliminated, the human turned their attention to securing a permanent stronghold. Where once they had been an outsider, at the mercy of the planet's constant threats, they were now taking control. They selected a relatively calm area, a strategic location sheltered by natural rock formations, and began constructing a more permanent shelter. Using tools they had fashioned from bone, stone, and metal scraps from the wreckage, they built reinforced walls and ceilings. The structure was not just a shelter, it was a fortress, complete with defensive mechanisms to ward off any future attacks. In addition to the shelter, the human also worked on establishing reliable food and water sources. Using knowledge of the environment, they developed an effective system of trapping smaller prey, cultivating plants for food, and ensuring a steady supply of drinkable water. Over time, they marked the territory with signs and boundaries, mapping the land in a way that would allow them to navigate it with ease. No longer was this a fight for survival, it had become a strategy for dominance. The human was no longer merely enduring, they were thriving. As the tribunal watched, the atmosphere shifted from one of disbelief to genuine admiration. Counselor Zal, who had once been so dismissive of the human's chances, was now silent, the disbelief on his face replaced with a wary respect. They have done what no other species could. They've turned this Deathworld into a home, he muttered under his breath. The others remained stunned, unable to deny the remarkable achievements of the human. Their expectations had been shattered. The human had not only survived, but they had begun to thrive in the most hostile environment imaginable. A heated debate erupted among the counselors. Some members, who had initially believed the human's efforts were nothing more than temporary survival, now acknowledged that the human's resilience and adaptability were not flukes but characteristics that defined them. One counselor even went as far as to say, "Perhaps we have underestimated the entire species. Their ability to learn, to overcome, is far beyond what we assumed." Others were less convinced, still holding on to the belief that humanity's triumphs were purely the result of resourceful improvisation, but the majority were left in stunned silence. It was becoming undeniable that the human had far exceeded all expectations. Despite the lingering skepticism from a few, there was no denying the impact of the human's accomplishments. Their victory over the predator, their creation of a fortified stronghold, and their ability to adapt and thrive in an environment that was supposed to destroy them had left the tribunal members speechless. For the first time, some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy found themselves in awe of a species they had once regarded as weak, unworthy, and primitive. The tribunal's leaders began to look at each other in uncertainty. The human had done what none of their own species could have accomplished, mastering a world designed to kill, outsmarting an ecosystem meant to overwhelm, and surviving against odds that would have crushed even the most resilient of creatures. The human had proven that there was something fundamentally unique about their species, a combination of intelligence, resourcefulness, and willpower that no other species possessed. As the discussions continued, it became clear that the tribunal was being forced to reconsider their previous assumptions about humanity. Counselor Yora, who had been quietly observing the humans' progress, now spoke with a new level of respect. "Perhaps we have misjudged them," Yora said. "We saw a species on the brink of destruction, but we did not see the depth of their resolve." Her voice held the weight of realization, as if acknowledging that humanity's greatest strength was not just their ability to adapt, but their refusal to be defeated by any obstacle. The debate continued, but the tone had changed. The tribunal, once confident in their judgment, was now grappling with the reality that humanity was not just a species to be condemned but a force to be reckoned with. What had begun as a punishment had now become a testament to the unyielding human spirit. The counselors, once certain of humanity's impending failure, were now uncertain of what they had just witnessed, a triumph that had shattered the very foundation of their beliefs. The Galactic Tribunal, once confident in their judgment of humanity as a primitive, volatile species, now found themselves questioning the very foundation of their beliefs. The humans' remarkable survival and eventual thriving on the Deathworld had left a profound impact on the Council, and the members convened for a serious debate about the implications of what they had just witnessed. The initial reaction of disbelief had given way to a grudging respect, but now, as they discussed the situation further, a deeper question emerged: could humanity be something more than just a species to control, a species to test? The tribunal members had seen many civilizations rise and fall, and most of them were eager to maintain their superiority over other races. Yet, the human had demonstrated a unique strength, a strength that transcended their physical limitations. Their capacity for adaptation, their refusal to accept defeat, and their intelligence in the face of impossible odds had left an indelible mark on the Council. Some of the counselors, particularly those who had initially doubted humanity's resilience, now began to see the value of forming an alliance with them rather than continuing to view them as inferior. "We were wrong to dismiss them," counselors all admitted, his tone no longer filled with disdain. "We saw their fragility, but we did not account for their ability to adapt and overcome. They have shown us that we were the ones underestimating them." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, and the debate shifted from whether humanity should be destroyed to whether they could be a valuable ally. As the tribunal deliberated, they came to a surprising conclusion: the human strength was not just in survival, but in adaptability and resilience, traits that could serve the entire galaxy. Realizing that humanity could offer something truly unique, the tribunal sent a message to the human, offering a chance for a new role in the galaxy, one of respect and honor rather than punishment. The message was simple but profound: humanity had earned its place in the galactic community. The tribunal was willing to offer the human a position, not as a subordinate, but as an advisor on survival and adaptability. The human would become a guide for other species, teaching them the very lessons that had allowed humanity to survive on a death world. This position would grant humanity access to the greater galactic network, with opportunities to collaborate and share knowledge, transforming humanity from a race of outcasts to a respected contributor. The human, having endured months of unimaginable hardship, read the message with a sense of disbelief. Their time on the death world had forged them into someone far stronger than they had ever been before, but it had also instilled a deep understanding of humanity's true potential. To be offered such a position was a testament to their resilience, but it was also a moment that would change the course of human history. After careful consideration, the human accepted the offer, realizing that this was not just an opportunity for themselves, but for the entire species. It was a chance to step onto the galactic stage, not as a prisoner or an outsider, but as a leader, a symbol of what humanity could achieve. When the human's return was announced, it was not with fanfare or celebration. Instead, it was a quiet recognition of a remarkable individual who had defied the odds. As the human re-entered the galactic fold, they carried with them not just the scars of their ordeal, but the weight of humanity's future. The tribunal watched with a mixture of awe and curiosity, now understanding that humanity's place in the galaxy had forever been altered. The human's journey had become a symbol of everything that made humanity unique: their determination, their intelligence, their refusal to be broken. In the aftermath, the tribunal members reflected on the lessons they had learned. Many of them, who had once seen humanity as weak, now recognized the true value of diversity. It was not just the strongest species that thrived in the galaxy, but the ones that could adapt, learn, and overcome. Humanity, once deemed insignificant, had proven that even in the face of insurmountable odds, the human spirit could not be defeated. It was this spirit, this ability to survive and thrive, that had earned humanity its place among the stars. As the council dispersed, each member carried with them a new understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. They had been humbled by the human's journey, and they knew that the galaxy would be forever changed because of it. Humanity's strength was not just in their ability to endure, but in their capacity to inspire. What began as a punishment had become a revelation, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. And in the end, it was that revelation that proved to be the greatest triumph of all.